Hello, hello. Happy Wednesday. It's not even Wild Hair Wednesday right now. Let me make sure that whoop, I am doing all the things and not getting distracted with other things. Happy Wednesday. Good morning. It is very early. It seems like the morning's been compacted for me. So I'm going to try not to make my screen move too much. Welcome to the second in the series of the November National Diabetes Month webinars. Last week um, we talked about what type 2 diabetes is, kind of like education and awareness, how you can get some basic understanding about where you're at with type 2 diabetes. Today, we are going to talk about prevention and strategies for reversal. Please let me know. I love to believe that the chat works, but for whatever reason, I don't know, I haven't been able to get the chat to work in the webinar. So try in the chat. I'm going to type in the chat. But please let me know if you can hear me. And if the chat doesn't work, please use the question and answer box, the Q&A box. You will also use this for any questions that we have as we go. I do want you to think of a couple of things. One, there should be time for coaching at the end of this. So if some of these strategies you have put into play and you haven't been able to make them work, I really would like you don't hesitate to bring that up. Chat says it's disabled, but that means you must be able to hear me. Thank you, Jennifer. Um, Make sure any coaching, like if you have tried to use these strategies that we're going to talk about today and they haven't worked for you, or you haven't seen the results, or you have a hard time implementing them, let's talk about that at the end of the coaching. I also want to make sure that you also understand that you understand the holiday is coming up next week, right? The way that coaching works is that you improving your relationship with yourself. That's the whole strategy behind coaching. You are improving the relationship with yourself so you can learn to trust yourself to do the things that are going to lead to your health. This is kind of what's been um, eroded over attempts and trials for, getting healthier and not being able to create that. Coaching really is the thing that helps you improve that relationship with yourself so you can start to trust yourself to do what's necessary for yourself to get healthy, which is what we all really want. So, as you're starting to look at the holiday coming up next week, kind of start thinking about what is your expectation of yourself? How much do you trust that you're going to be able to implement that expectation? And we can coach on that today. Absolutely. In fact, I would love it if everybody wants to come on and talk about what their plan is for the holiday, how they can make a strategic plan that is going to work for them, because I have a strategy that we do for that. So I'm happy to coach on any of that at the end of what I have to present. But then remember, next Friday at 9:30 Central Time, I am going to have an open coaching call for anybody. Some of my clients will be there, some of their friends will be there. I hope you come and I hope you invite all of your friends. Let's coach on what worked for Thanksgiving and what didn't work, and then get some clarity on what is going on in our brain so that we can start honing those skills, because that's really what we need to do. Y'all don't need me to tell you don't eat junk food. Y'all know that. What we need to talk about is why we continue to make choices that do not serve our health. So, Jennifer, I appreciate you telling me that the chat's disabled, but you can hear me. If somebody can make sure and let me know that you can see my slides. That's the other thing. So again, we're going to talk about diabetes and reversal. We are going to do a recap of the causes of type 2 diabetes. So insulin resistance, processed foods, the impact of processing foods on our insulin function and our cellular function. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Um, we're also going to talk about the effect of processed foods on our brain, because that is a big part of why we get and why we struggle with these things, really. We're going to talk about prevention and again, processed foods and, eating processed foods or not eating processed foods. And then we're going to talk about how to eat in alignment with our biology. That is a phrase that I talk about a lot. because a lot of times people are like, well, this runs in my family, or, everybody I know has this, or something wrong with me genetic. I must have the genes that predispose me for type 2 diabetes. And what I want to offer you is type 2 diabetes is an expected response to eating food that is not aligned with human biology, period, end of sentence. We should expect that diabetes develops when we're not eating foods that align with our body. And I talked about that last week. If you weren't here last week, please go and check the YouTube channel. That replay, you can find the replay from last week's information there. So, but we're going to talk about what it means, because that's really what you do to prevent diabetes, right? You eat in alignment with your biology, and then you don't develop the disease. We're going to talk about strategies for reversing it. We're going to talk about cleaning up your diet. We're going to talk about exercise. We're going to talk about fasting. We're going to talk about sleep. We're going to talk about stress. We're going to talk about all those. And then again, we're going to talk about, like, there will be a time for coaching and questions. So don't hesitate to put the questions in the question and answer box, but also hold on to any of these, or hold on to any specifics, scenarios that you had where you're like, yeah, I'm totally made the plan to not eat the candy in the afternoon, but for whatever reason, yesterday afternoon, I did it. If those things keep getting you, quote unquote, if those are the things that keep hanging you up, we can talk about that in coaching today. So, all right. I am going to advance my slides. I do not think that, oh no, the recording starts automatically. I can't master the chat, but I've mastered getting it recorded. So, all right, let's jump in. Before we get started, y'all have heard me say this, but recognize if you are medicated, please be careful making these changes. You have been medicated for the way you've eaten in the past. If you change the way you are going to eat in the future, you're going to have to be aware of your medications and how you need to change them. You need to get a very clear line of communication open up with the doctor who's prescribing those meds for you, so that they can get your blood sugars and start giving you guidance on which meds to come off of. Okay. This is part of what I help my clients do. I don't ever take over medical care, but I say, hey, it's not safe for you to take that med. You need to call your doctor today. You need to call them and figure out what they want you to do. Okay. I also will offer, if your doctor's like, you need to eat more carbs, like you need to not do this crazy dietary modification, like at that point you probably need to find out if there's another doctor, like start looking for another doctor whose goals for you align with your goals for you. Okay, but please, please, please be careful if you are medicated for your type 2 diabetes. Those meds have been started because of the way you've eaten in the past. If you change that, you're going to need to change those meds. So let's talk about a recap on type 2 diabetes. What is type 2 diabetes? Type 2 diabetes, again, is what happens when we eat processed foods, when we eat these foods that aren't really natural for us. When we process foods, we alter the natural ratio of nutrients, of these macronutrients, the carbohydrate, the protein, and the fat ratios in these foods. Usually, processing foods leads to a concentration of the carbohydrate component of the food. And of course, this increases insulin release. So this is why the food component is such a strong driver for the development of type 2 diabetes, because when we eat these foods, we increase our insulin release, and that insulin release is what causes the insulin resistance. So again, I gave the examples of jelly and fruit roll-ups, as if anybody needs me to tell them that eating fruit, quote unquote, off of wax paper is not a good idea. Clearly, it's not a good idea. But even bread, when we think about wheat that we get from the field, and then the flour that's used to make the bread, we have pulverized that food from the field into a fine powder. We've removed the husks, which is fiber. We've removed the micronutrients, the minerals, we've removed the vitamins, and we have just pulverized it into a fine powder. And then that powder is just carbohydrates. We bake it up, we put some honey in there, or maybe some sugar in there because we love our honey wheat bread, and that's what we eat. We take this whole food and we concentrate the carbohydrate component. Same thing with the orange juice. It takes about 6 to 8 whole oranges to make a 6 to 8 ounce glass of orange juice. You have just taken the whole food, removed all of the pulp and all of the fiber, and concentrated the sugar component, the juice component. We concentrate the carbohydrate component. And this is why the the processed foods lead to type 2 diabetes. We concentrate the carbohydrate component. That carbohydrate component then, of course, causes us to release a huge surge of insulin, and that leads to insulin resistance, right? Exposure to high concentrations of insulin over a very prolonged period of time. This doesn't occur in one day, right? Like it's many, many, many months and likely years of being exposed to high concentrations of insulin over a prolonged period of time that leads to insulin resistance. This is why the food is the issue. So let's talk about what insulin resistance is, a recap on that before we dive into kind of prevention strategies and treatment and like reversal strategies, which is far more fun. So this is a cell, this is a picture of a cell. I don't know, let me get a pointer so y'all can see what I'm talking about. So you can see this picture over here on the left side of the screen, that is a cell and it's a normal cell. Insulin is this little red ball and it binds to this receptor on the cell surface. When this binds, you can see over here on the right side of the cell, it's bound there in that receptor. That allows this pore in this channel inside the cell membrane to open up and bring these glucose molecules inside from the outside. Okay. Then when the glucose is inside the cell can burn it up as energy. It uses it as fuel. What happens in insulin resistance is that insulin receptor gets blocked and there is no longer this binding occurring, which means this cell channel, this glucose channel, no longer opens up. The glucose on the outside of the cell climbs very high. And that's what we as physicians pick up as diabetes, high blood sugars, right? In addition, like you're not getting fuel inside of the cell. So what you pick up is that you kind of feel crappy, even though it's kind of this low level, low grade feeling of cruddiness. Okay. So recognize the pancreas can override this block. The pancreas can put out so much insulin that it overrides this block and that allows that glucose to come in. But what that higher level of insulin does then is continue or persist the insulin resistance or even worsen the insulin resistance, which is why treating type 2 diabetes with insulin or meds that make more insulin is never the right answer. Okay. What you need to do is decrease the amount of insulin out there so that this bound component releases the bound pieces to it and opens up that receptor site so that we can start binding that insulin more effectively. Trying to make my mouse work correctly now. It doesn't want to work now because I have that laser pointer on. Okay, here we go. So what we see in the brain, which is really important to realize, is that when we concentrate our natural foods, our brain has this way to incentivize us to eat because 10,000 years ago, getting food was not as easy as getting in your car, your seatbelt with all of your airbags, driving, following street signs and lights, parking in the parking spot, going into the store with the sliding glass doors and purchasing your food ad lib, right? Like it wasn't as easy as just going to the store and getting food. It was actually dangerous to get food, right? Like you could fall and hurt yourself. You could step on something that hurt yourself. You could get bit by a bug that was poisonous. You could have the food that you're hunting turn and hunt you. Like getting out of the cave 10,000 years ago to go and hunt was a dangerous experience. Our brain had to incentivize us to override the kind of negativity bias, like we're going to die if we go hunt food, so that we could go out and do that and not starve to death in the cave. So what our brain did was our brain was like, when you eat, we release a little bit of dopamine. That dopamine incentivizes you to go out and do it again. You feel good, you're motivated to repeat it. When we concentrate the carbohydrate component of our natural foods, we get a concentrated release of dopamine. And what that does is it overemphasizes the importance of that food, that specific food, not of all the food, of the Snickers bar, of the Twix bar, of the ice cream, of the potato chips. It incentivizes it, like over exaggerates the importance in our brain of that food. And that leads us to desire and seek it and crave it all the time, which of course leads to overeating, which then creates even more dopamine released into our brain. Okay. So these are the things that we talked about last week. If you want more information on it, please check out the YouTube video from last week where I go through each of these because it is really that these are the reasons, this is the information behind why we have type 2 diabetes and what is causing it. And also, of course, some there's elements about awareness and how to decide where you're at in your metabolic health in that video from last week. So check it out. Let's talk about prevention though. I love this picture. It was put out, I think, in the 90s, and it was like, I think it was magazine, maybe it was Science. It was one of the big magazines, had it as the cover. And this is definitely like where we're at. We have evolved, and really what's happened is we've changed as human beings, as species. Our environment has changed so much and our biology has not been able to keep up with it. And what that leads to is then disease in a lot of different ways. You know, if you last week I talked about insulin resistance being the tree trunk of a tree that has many different branches. Those branches are disease. The insulin resistance is the trunk. It is the root cause of many of the different diseases. So, in general, our environment and mainly our dietary environment is not aligned with our biology. So the way to prevent type 2 diabetes is to live in a way that matches your biology. So this includes food, this includes exercise, this includes sleep, this includes stress management. Recognized 10,000 years ago, when we were stressed, it was a single unit of stress, right? Like you were stressed because something was trying to kill you. Whenever you freed yourself from the thing trying to kill you, you were no longer stressed. Versus what's happening now, we're stressed because our businesses need to run, because we're in an argument or we're in a relationship with somebody that we don't want to be in or that's stressful to us, or because bills need to be paid and there's not money for the bills, whatever it is. These are the things that stress us out, and they are not done at the end of the day. They are not single units of stress. They are durations of stress, and we're not managing that well. And those are the kinds of things that really do not align with our biology and kind of create illness. My kids are always like, Mom, it's not always about food. And I'm like, oh, yeah, most of the time it is always about food. But in some of the situations, they're right. Like, it's not just the food that causes diabetes. You will see with what we talk about today, that is the lion's share of it. But there is also exercise. There is also sleep patterns. There's also stress management. There are other things that definitely contribute to the development of disease as human beings. So align with your biology and don't eat junk food. We are, I always say, of all the animals on the earth, all the animals on the planet, human beings are the only animals that do not eat the foods that the earth makes for them. Squirrels do not complain about acorns and ask for pizza at night, and deer does not get bored with grass and ask for Chinese food. And those poor koalas can only eat eucalyptus leaves. That's all they can eat. For everybody who's like, I want variety in my diet, those poor koalas have no variety. If they eat anything other than eucalyptus, they get sick. Okay. If the squirrel, I mean, the squirrel can eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? Like it can steal it from a picnic basket. It will eat it. Its little brain will fire up like 4th of July fireworks. It will feel amazing. It will like be totally buzzed out. And that won't kill it, right? Like one peanut butter and jelly isn't going to kill a squirrel. But if the squirrel eats it every day, the squirrel will get sick just like we do, right? Sometimes people are like, but our dogs don't eat the food that the planet makes for them. Nope. And our dogs and our cats also are developing diabetes because they're eating the way that we do. A high carbohydrate food or a high carbohydrate diet that does not match their biology. If you think about the zoo, I love using the zoo as an example. If you think about the research and development dollars and then the amount of money that they spend to get the appropriate diet for the giraffes versus the rhinos versus the cougars, right? All of those diets are different. And they spend a lot of money, and they don't just feed them all the same thing because those animals will get sick. It is the same thing for us. We will get sick if we eat food that does not match our biology. So we really need to avoid junk food. And junk food is really anything that is not something that you can find on the earth. If you cannot imagine how it came from the earth and the least steps between when it came from the earth and when it ended up on your plate, those foods are going to be ideal for you. So let's talk about reversal. That's prevention. Let's talk about reversal. The tools that I teach women, I teach a lot of different tools when you come into the program, there are 12 foundational weeks where we talk about 12 different strategies and tools for you to implement. Really, you're building a really robust tool set so that you can learn how to reverse your type 2 diabetes, live a naturally healthy life at any stage in your world, like whether you're 40 or whether you're 60 or 70 or 80. You're going to have the tools and you're going to have practiced them and know how to utilize them. But the main tools, the tools at least that I want to talk about today, the ones that I think give you the most bang for your buck are going to be food. It is the lion's share of the issue. It's food, it's exercise, it's sleep, and stress. Those are the four tools I want to talk about. Food is the most important. There is no amount of sleep you're going to do that is going to make eating Snickers and Twix and chips all day long. Okay, there is no amount of exercise you're going to do that erases the Snickers, the Twix, and the chips. Because remember, it's not about burning the energy, it's about the insulin production of the food. And no matter how much exercise you do, the insulin production still occurs and will lead to insulin resistance. There is no amount of Zen meditation that you can do that is going to undo those foods either. Okay. Food is the lion's share of the issue. So figuring out the strategies for food. So part of that, it comes to be like, what food do I eat? And then how do I eat my food? So cleaning up your diet is a big strategy that I teach. Intermittent fasting is a strategy that I teach. Nutritional ketosis is an option. All of these are different strategies that you can use. We're going to talk about a few of them today. I'm not going to dive into them too deeply. I'm going to talk about the ones that I see people get the most bang for their buck and use frequently. The first thing is, what do we eat? The cleaning up your diet. The food that you eat should look like the food that the earth makes for you, period, end of sentence. And it's not because that's good or great or moral, and it's not like people who eat those foods are better human beings. It's simply because that is the food that matches your biology. Okay. So the food that you eat should look like food that you can find on the earth somewhere. So I always say you can imagine how to pluck a carrot from the earth. So even though you buy it at the grocery store, you can imagine where it comes from on the earth. You can imagine where lettuce comes from on the earth. You can imagine plucking a chicken. I have 4 chickens out back. My backyard's over there. 4 chickens out back. You can literally pluck those suckers up off the ground. And I can point to you where a thigh is, where a breast is, where a wing is. Like, you can point to the food that you eat. I don't eat my chickens. I eat their eggs. But you can pluck those animals even up off the ground and you can see the food that you eat. Okay. Things that maybe a little are different, like beans. I don't know clearly how beans are. Some of them I do. I can remember picking green beans with my grandmother when I was a child, but like kidney beans, I'm like, I'm not sure where those come from. I do know they come from the earth. Same thing with like lima beans, right? Or garbanzo beans. And then there are nuts, of course. And it's the same thing. Like, I live in a state that this is not a natural food to my state. But I do know that they come from trees, like pecan trees. I mean, I've seen a pecan tree and I can kind of imagine how that looks, right? Bread, though, is one of those things. Yes, I know. I live in a farm state. I know what wheat looks like, right? I know how that comes in the ground, but that thing that comes from the ground looks nothing like the food that we use it to make, right? The wheat foods, right? The flour foods. There are a lot of steps between the wheat that we grow in the ground and the stuff that ends up on our plate. There are a lot of processing steps, okay? So the foods that we eat, like the things that aren't going to make us sick, the things that are going to reverse the disease that we've already created, are going to be the things that look more like stuff that comes from the earth, and you know clearly how it got there, okay? The earth makes all of our food. It's almost like we are beings, we are animals of this amazing planet. The earth makes all of the food that we need as human beings in the perfect ratio of nutrients, of macronutrients and micronutrients and fiber and phytochemicals necessary for the optimal function of our body. The earth makes all of the food that way. Okay. So that is, again, it matches our biology. That is why we should eat the food that the earth makes for us. One of the food strategies that I teach is intermittent fasting. This improves insulin resistance by decreasing the amount of time that you're eating and making your pancreas spit out insulin. Okay. If you're only eating for 8 hours a day instead of 15 hours a day, your pancreas is only making insulin for 8 hours a day. And because of that, you allow your cells to heal up. If you look at this graph, this is a graph of a typical a standard American diet eating pattern. I have the hiccups, I apologize. And so you can see at 7 a.m., they start with eating. Okay, they eat breakfast. This graph, I'm sorry, this graph has insulin. This line is showing insulin concentrations in the body. So you can see at 7 a.m. Oh, you can't see because I don't have the pointer on. Let's try again. You can see here at 7 a.m. they start eating. And then you can see throughout the day, you have various increases in the insulin. I will say insulin does not burn off as quickly. You see this lunch hour at 1 o'clock, they ate and it spikes up, and then by 2, it's down. Insulin does not burn off that quickly. In fact, the food that you have eaten is not even entirely digested in the hour. It takes 6 to 8 hours for that food to clear your stomach, much less to stop being absorbed and creating insulin in your body. So it probably what happens is you start eating and really your insulin levels stay very elevated throughout the day until you stop eating and give your body time for that insulin to die off. So you can see here at 11 o'clock, they have their last meal. And you can see that insulin level doesn't drop really until 3:30 in the morning. And that's probably more accurate than this up down thing that we're seeing here. Okay. What that means is that your cells are exposed to insulin from 7 a.m. until 3 or 3:30 in the morning. Your cells are only getting a few hours of break from insulin exposure, which is why they're insulin resistant. It's why this pattern of eating leads to insulin resistance. Okay. What fasting allows you to do is create this big spell of time where your body is not exposed to insulin. Your cells are not exposed to insulin, and that allows them to heal up. This is why fasting is really an incredibly powerful tool for reversing insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. You can see, again, you start eating here. This window starts at 2 p.m. They start eating. Their insulin goes up. It likely stays up quite a bit higher than what we're seeing here throughout the day until being at 10 p.m. And then again, I don't know why it didn't drop off in the previous graph, but this shows that it's dropping off somewhere at 10:30 or 11. That's probably not true. It probably, you stop eating at 10, it's probably dropping off somewhere closer to 3 or 4 in the morning. But if you don't start eating until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you have just given your cells 10 hours to heal from the insulin exposure. Okay. I don't want you to think that insulin exposure is bad or toxic to the cells. Insulin is good for the cells, but not all day long, right? Even sunshine burns if you get too much, right? Too much of a good thing is still too much. Okay. And over time, too much of insulin leads to insulin resistance, and you have to learn how to heal your cells from that. So, warning again, if you are on meds, doing intermittent fasting can make you sick. You can get sick very quickly, like the kind of sick that involves going to a hospital, the kind of sick that if somebody isn't there to help you when you are no longer able to help yourself because you kept on your meds and you started doing fasting and nobody was there to help you through that, that can end up very badly. Okay? So make sure again that you reach out to your doctor. Tell them what you're doing and get guidance from them. They will likely change when you're taking some of your meds. Like, oh, I want you to shift this injection to this time, or I want you to stop taking your fast-acting insulin as a great example. I want you to only do the long-acting insulin if you're going to do intermittent fasting, or only do the the short-acting insulin when you're having a meal, right? Have a conversation with your doctor. Then also keep really good, tight monitoring of your blood sugars. Prick your finger. Your fingers are going to get sore in this process of reversal, okay? That's all right. You're going to reverse this, and there's going to be a time where you don't check your blood sugar for months or weeks or years or however long you want to. You only check it when you want to feel good about yourself because that number is amazing, okay? but please be careful doing intermittent fasting if you're medicated. You can get sick. I also want to talk briefly about nutritional ketosis. Nutritional ketosis is just dropping your carbohydrate level very low, which allows your insulin level to drop, right? Then, of course, when the insulin level's low, you start burning fat as energy instead of carbohydrates. This picture to the left on the screen is fat cells. That's what fat cells look like. Adipose, adipocytes, that's what they look like. And then the keto sticks are kind of how you monitor to see if you're in ketosis. Again, being very, very careful when you do that because your meds for your diabetes are not affecting nutritional ketosis or fat or adipocytes or adipose tissue or insulin. The meds that you are given to treat your type 2 diabetes are only affecting the carbohydrate and the glucose count, like what your blood sugar says. That's all they're doing. Even though the blood sugar is not the problem and the blood sugar is not the fix, we have to fix this insulin level, right? So if you change the way you're eating to lower that insulin level by dropping your carbohydrate count very low, those meds again will need to change. So be very careful with that. And if you have any questions about any of that, please make sure that we talk about that today. So let's talk about other tools, not just food, but other tools. So this is going to be exercise, this is going to be sleep, this is going to be stress. When we exercise, the coolest thing happens. I got to tell you guys, when I went to medical school, I had been a nurse before I went to medical school, and I thought that I was going to go to medical school and I was going to learn all of the magic that happened. And sometimes I did. I was really disappointed that I did not learn nearly as much magic as I really, really hoped I would. I thought I was going to learn all of the biology and the cellular function for why things happen. What I learned was the cellular function enough so I could figure out which medication to prescribe to fix a disease state. That's all I learned. But sometimes, just every so often, there were these cool little tidbits. And as I have, continued to educate myself outside of my formal education, I've learned these kinds of things, which are, it's like magic. It's the coolest thing ever. So if you remember that diabetes and insulin resistance happens on this cellular level. So you have a cell, and what it should do in the presence of insulin is it should bind the insulin here at this receptor and open up this glucose channel and bring it in and burn it off as energy. But what happens in insulin resistance is this binding site, this receptor site, gets blocked, and you're never able to bring that glucose in. Exercise does the coolest thing. It bypasses that whole need for insulin, and it brings the glucose in without having to bind the insulin. So this can be blocked up and resistant as much as the cell wants to be. There is a backdoor method that allows this channel to open up. It's actually a different channel, but allows it to come in, that glucose to come in and burn that glucose by bypassing that insulin resistance. So it doesn't matter how diabetic you are. It doesn't matter how insulin resistant your cells are. Exercise allows you to lower your blood sugar in a non-insulin dependent way. So an insulin independent way. You get to bring the glucose inside, irrelevant of insulin, no matter what the problem is with insulin. This is huge. This is a huge player. This is the second most important thing that you can do to fix your type 2 diabetes. And I'll tell you why. When blood sugar is trapped outside of the cell and not able to come in because our cells are insulin resistant, what that does is it sends a message to your pancreas that your blood sugar is still very high and the pancreas probably ought to keep putting out more insulin. So now we had a level of insulin, but now we have even more insulin. And what creates insulin resistance? Insulin. Like the more insulin the pancreas puts out, the more insulin resistant those cells are going to be, right? Over time, the pancreas will yell loud enough to overcome that resistance. But what it does is leads to more insulin resistance every time that the pancreas has to be putting out this higher concentration of insulin, okay? So if your cells are not able to bring that glucose in and lower the blood sugar, if your cells can't do that because they're insulin resistant, what we're doing is sending a constant message to the pancreas to keep spitting out insulin, okay? So If you can find a way to open your cells up and bring that glucose in, irrelevant of insulin, suddenly you're not sending that message to the pancreas constantly to say, put out more insulin. This is a huge, huge tool to improve insulin sensitivity, to improve blood sugar management, to reverse insulin resistance, to reverse type 2 diabetes. I'm going to say it again for the people in the back, okay? When you exercise, when you do sweaty, intense exercise, your cells start to use sugar, use glucose, bring glucose inside and burn it off as fuel in a way that is entirely irrelevant of insulin and insulin resistance. When that happens, your blood sugar lowers and your blood stops sending a message to your pancreas that you need more insulin, driving more insulin resistance. We shut that process down entirely. You lower your blood sugars, you stop making insulin, you allow your cells to heal. Okay. That is the power of exercise. So, again, there is no amount of exercise that is going to undo pizza, right? Like, you can't just go out and eat all the junk food and think you're somehow going to use that, like, Mr. Clean magic eraser to make it all go away with like a long enough exercise spell. That is not going to happen. But as you're working on reversing your insulin resistance, exercise is the second most powerful tool I would recommend for using. All right. If you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know, because I just, again, it's like magic. It's like, oh, that's the coolest, slickest tool ever for reversing insulin resistance. All right, so let's talk about sleep. Sleep is so important. Back to my philosophy. What were we doing 10,000 years ago? We are the only animal on all of the planet that uses an alarm clock to limit our sleep. Sleep is a natural biological function that must occur. It's like going pee. It's not like, I ain't got time to use the bathroom, so I'm just not going to use the bathroom. That is not an option. Sleep is not optional either. It's not negotiable. When sleep is not adequate, health declines. We know poor sleep is associated with increased insulin resistance. In fact, there are studies that say if you limit sleep, and I think it's like limiting sleep from 8 hours to like 5 or 6 hours. I don't remember the study specifically, but it's not like, oh, you limit sleep to 1 hour a night. No. If you limit sleep to like 4 to 6 hours a night for 2 weeks, you can induce the body to go into an insulin resistant state, just like type 2 diabetes, without changing the food at all. This is the power of sleep. This is how much impact sleep has on your health. Okay. Squirrels don't ask for pizza at night. They also don't use an alarm clock, and neither, I mean, like, you should use an alarm clock to get up. But what that means is on the other side, in the nighttime, you're protecting your sleep. You're getting to bed early. My kids laugh at me because I shut my life down somewhere between 8 and 9 p.m. every night. Like, if I'm up past 10, it is like a special occasion. It does not happen on a regular basis. I protect my sleep in the evening because I know I've got to get up at a certain time in the morning to do the things that are important to me. Okay. So recognize what happens during sleep is you have to give yourself enough time to work through sleep cycles. So if you can see this, I hope you can see it. If you're watching on a phone, come back to this graph on a laptop or on a computer. So you can see there are these faint blue lines here. They delineate, or they segregate, they separate out 5 different sleep cycles. So this is 1, this is 2, 3, 4, 5. Each of these sleep cycles are about 90 minutes in duration. Some humans have longer sleep cycles, some humans have shorter sleep cycles. You must get through these sleep cycles in order for your body to do all of the biology that it has to do at night when you're asleep. All of the repair, all of the healing, everything that the human body needs to do requires these 5 sleep cycles. You can kind of see this line that comes down like a stair and goes back up, and then comes down like a stair and goes back up. You can see in each of these sleep cycles, that line is a different shape. It looks a little different. Right here in this last sleep cycle, you don't dive nearly as deep. That is normal for these sleep cycles. And what's happening hormonally and biologically is different in every one of these. You cannot get to this last sleep cycle until you have gone through these other four. You can't rush it. Again, this is biology. I tell this to my clients all the time. They're like, why won't it fix quicker? Why won't my numbers? What do I need to do to make it happen quicker? And I'm like, sometimes it just takes time, guys. When we try to force biology, it's like me trying to force a storm to pass across the plains quicker. It does not happen. There's nothing I can do. I have to let biology, I have to let science, I have to let nature do its thing. You have to let nature do its thing for sleep as well. You cannot force it. There's no way to shortcut to getting to that fifth sleep cycle without going through the first four or the first four. So that's 90 minutes times five. It ends up being like 7.5 hours. Human being probably needs somewhere between 7 and 9 hours of sleep every night. Okay. That is just the biology of what the human being needs. And again, if you're not doing it, it is very like it will create disease. I would offer there is a TED Talk for anybody who likes TED Talks. They're 20-minute long things. They're very informative most of the time. But there is a TED Talk by a sleep scientist named Matt Walker. I highly recommend it. It is called Sleep as Your Superpower. You can Google it and you can find it. And it's really, really I mean, he's got a long book, literally, it's like a 15-hour book if you listen to it. Everything that's really important from that book, there is some other stuff that's important about the science behind what he talks about, but the really important pieces of information is in that 20-minute TED Talk. Well spent time. I highly recommend it. So, Jennifer, I see your question about fasting and liquids. I will come back to that. And if I don't, you like give me a big one too, and I'll get at it. I do want to talk about stress management because this is another big component. I've actually had a number of women, of course, the women that I work with are go-getters and they are type A'ers and they are get shit doners and they're just amazing. They're killing it in every other area of their life and they're having a hard time managing this diabetes part. The stress component is huge. Like this can be a huge player, and that's why I kind of put it as my fourth part, right? You're going to get the most bang for your buck out of your food. You're going to get the next most bang for your buck from exercise. The next thing that's really important is sleep. And then the fourth thing that I think you're going to utilize most effectively is really a stress management strategy. This can be meditation. I think meditation is probably the easiest part to do, like the easiest thing to implement, but it also includes yoga, it includes prayer, it includes Tai Chi, all sorts of movement meditations and those sorts of things. Meditation, stress management, I should say, but certainly meditation and yoga and prayer can incorporate all of these things. But what happens is that when you're taking a deep breath, let me take a step back. Stress is a element of it turns on what's called the sympathetic nervous system. There are two parts of it's not our entire nervous system, but there are two parts that kind of run our internal milieu, our internal environment. You have the sympathetic nervous system, which is the stress, the fight or flight nervous system. And then you also have the parasympathetic nervous system. That is the rest and digest nervous system. Okay. You cannot run the brake and the gas. You cannot run them at the same time. Okay. So if you can find a way to increase the parasympathetic tone is what we call it, like increase the amount of function of activity in the parasympathetic system, it immediately means you have to decrease the sympathetic system. In turn, if you're stressed out, that parasympathetic tone is going to be very low. That activity in the parasympathetic system is going to be low because the activity in the sympathetic system is going to be high. Okay. Meditation or any of these stress management techniques implement a breathing um, a breathing practice, really, is what it comes down to. When you take a deep breath, you move your diaphragm low. You like move it downward. Through the center of the diaphragm, there's a hole. It's where our esophagus passes into our stomach. It's where our aorta passes from our heart to our lower extremities, carrying blood. In addition to those two structures which run together, there is also a nerve. It's called the vagus nerve, and it is a parasympathetic nerve. It turns on that resting and relaxation and the rest and digest part of our nervous system, that parasympathetic nervous system. When you take a deep breath and you lower that diaphragm, it literally rubs, it literally stimulates in a physical way that parasympathetic nerve, causing that activity in that parasympathetic system to elevate, which means the other one has to come down. It's just the way they work together. Okay. So that is why these strategies are powerful for causing stress or for managing our stress in our life. You'll notice, like, once you start to do, I find in meditation, again, I prefer meditation. I also do prayer. I do yoga, but I don't do it daily. It's more of a once a week class that I usually take. But what I find is because of meditation, I notice in the day when my shoulders are coming up towards my ears. That is a stress response that I have, and I'm very aware of it. I feel it. And when I feel it, I'm like, that's stress. That's my sympathetic system overactivated. I need to decrease that. And 3 deep breaths will get that parasympathetic activity higher and lower the sympathetic activity. Now, if I'm getting chased by a guy with a gun or a knife, I don't want to take those deep breaths and calm that down. I want to definitely live in my sympathetic nervous system and run. Like, that's the point of it. But that's a very rare experience for me. In fact, that's never in my 48, pushing 49 years of life, I've never had that experience. So the rest of the time, I probably need to figure out, is this something I need my sympathetic, my like fight or flight system engaged? And if not, how can I shift it to get my parasympathetic, my rest and digest system more engaged? These stress management techniques are what do that. So recognize when that sympathetic system is engaged, you're releasing cortisol, you're releasing epinephrine and norepinephrine. All of those drive higher blood sugars. Because if you're running from somebody who's trying to kill you with a gun or a knife, you need to feed your muscles glucose. This is the biology of it. Okay. So if you're just stressed about getting a project done, your muscles don't really need any more glucose. They don't need that. We just need some focus and to get the project done. That is where, like, oh, I feel my shoulders going towards my ears. I need to take a few deep breaths and turn on that sympathetic, more engage that sympathetic or parasite and disengage my sympathetic side. Okay. So disengage the stress, engage the rest, right? That's how it has to work. So these strategies, meditation, yoga, prayer, all of them help engage that parasympathetic side and increase that activity there. I do recommend having a practice each day of checking in with what's happening internally. Yoga, or I'm sorry, meditation, I actually mix the meditation and the prayer together, like they go together for me. But that meditation practice turns my focus inside and helps me to start become aware of what happens internally for me. What am I feeling? Is it stressful? Is it calm? What's happening internally? By being aware and kind of dabbling in that and just like learning about myself for 10 minutes each morning, I am more prepared through the day to recognize when there's something frictiony, when there's stress inside of me that I need to manage with maybe a few deep breaths. Okay. So that's stress management. And again, stress will lead to higher blood sugars. And that's why learning stress management is so important. There are a number of apps that I use that I really like. Calm is one of them. I have a lifetime membership to Calm because I like it so much. You can get a like 2-week trial. I highly recommend you do that. The other one is Headspace. I've also used that. I just like to Calm better. You can Google on YouTube, like you can Google like meditation, 10-minute meditation practice on YouTube, and then you can open it up for free on YouTube and you can use it. So you can learn information about how you will do with meditation in a very cheap, easy, available way just from our phones or from the computer that you're watching this on. So I highly recommend getting a stress management strategy and practice so that you can start to have more control over that part of your life and your body and your biology. And, to be real honest, it just feels better. So I would highly recommend that. So next week, again, Thanksgiving is next week. I definitely am game for talking with anybody about what their plan is for for Thanksgiving on Thursday. On Friday at 9:30 a.m., there will be a coaching call. It's an open coaching call for whomever wants to come. So invite your friends. Tell your sister, my clients will be there. I've told them already to tell their friends, tell their sisters, tell their mothers, whoever, so that people can get help. Part of this means that you set a plan for yourself. And really, that's what I'm happy to work through today is a plan. What does it look like to make a plan for the holiday? Um, and then practice the plan and see what happens and see what kind of results you get. I'm going to answer Jennifer's question. When intermittent fasting, what types of liquids can you drink in the morning, i.e., loose leaf teas? Yeah, so any liquids that are not sweet. Um, there are different schools of thought on fasting and what it means. Some people feel that coffee is a break of the fast because it requires your body to metabolize it. I'm not going to disagree. Like my body has to manage caffeine because I'm drinking coffee. Okay, fine. But it's not something that increases insulin. Okay. For me and for reversing type 2 diabetes, we need to fast in a way that does not increase your insulin. That's the thing, because increasing your insulin is what I consider to break your fast. Okay. So any fluid that does not increase your insulin should be fine. Coffee's fine. Loose leaf teas are definitely fine. Be very careful for anything that you get at Starbucks because what sells? Starbucks is not the devil. The Starbucks goddess is not a devil. However, like their whole business plan is to sell things. So they want to sell things that people like. You know what people like? You know what the humans really, really love? We love sugar. We love sugar. So they put sugar in all the things. And if not sugar, they put some other sweetener, stevia maybe, or artificial sweeteners, right? Like monk fruit, sometimes honey, stevia, those are probably the natural things. But then they put artificial sweeteners. Any of those sweeteners have the potential. It's not guaranteed that will happen, but it has the potential to increase insulin production in your body and that therefore breaking the fast. So loose leaf teas are usually fine. Stay away from the syruped teas at coffee houses. You will notice that when you stop eating so much sweet stuff, that your taste buds change, and suddenly some loose leaf teas do taste good and sweet. I noticed that was at Starbucks and I had their brewed chai tea, and I could see the tea bag, like I knew it was a tea, that I asked them to do, the brewed, not the syrup chai. And it was very sweet. And I actually brought it up. I was like, "Are you sure nobody put any, like, you didn't put any sweetener in this? Like, nothing, like, not a pump of simple sugar syrup in here." And it wasn't. It was just that my taste buds had changed so much that that chai, the cinnamon and the chai tasted sweet. So be aware if there's anything sweet tasting, you probably need to really critique that and see, investigate, see, make sure there's nothing in there. But outside of that, water, yes. Coffee, definitely. Tea, absolutely. Even water with a little bit of lemon juice. There's actually evidence that that improves glycemic control. That probably counts as long as it's not like half a cup of lemon, right? Like it really should be 1 to 2 tablespoons of lemon in that water. Should not be enough carbohydrate in that amount of lemon juice to stimulate a significant insulin response. The same thing with heavy whipping cream or any kind of creamer. Do not use the artificially sweetened creamer. So if it says it's pumpkin spice, don't eat that. If it says it's vanilla, no, those all have sweeteners in it. Plain creamer, usually heavy whipping cream, 1 to 2 tablespoons are not going to have enough carbohydrates to stimulate a insulin response. But the fat will, one, give you some cut on the bitterness of the coffee, um, also give you some satiation throughout the morning to help you feel full, even though you haven't really had a meal yet. So Jennifer, I hope that was helpful. Please let me know if there are any other questions or if I didn't answer that clearly or if you stimulate any other questions there. So best books on insulin resistance, on reversing insulin resistance that I recommend. Thanks, Eve. I love this question. Any other questions, make sure you put in the chat box or the question and answer. I'm sorry, because silly chat box won't work. Make sure you put any other questions that you guys have in there. The best book I would recommend on insulin resistance is Metabolical by Robert Lustig, Lustig. He's a pediatric endocrinologist. He openly admits in this book that he went into pediatric endocrinology because he wasn't going to have to deal with chronic illnesses. And of course, in the course of his career, pediatric metabolic disease has just exploded, and that's all he deals with. So he has this wonderful book. It's called Metabolical. The first two-thirds of the book is wonderful. It talks about how food really is creating metabolic disease. The last part of it is really talking about policy change. And although I think that that's incredibly important, I really do think it's important. I'm not horribly inclined for that kind of work. Maybe I should try to hone that. I don't know. I mean, that would probably be helpful to the world in general. It's just not my natural disposition. So what I'm trying to say is it's kind of a long book to listen to. I think it was like probably 9 hours, but really the meat, the meat and potatoes, of what you need is probably in the first two-thirds of that. So I would highly recommend it. Metabolical, Metabolical, I think is how I would spell it. Robert Lustig is the author there. I think that's probably the most comprehensive book on reversing insulin resistance because remember, insulin resistance is the cause of many things. Prediabetes, diabetes, polycystic ovarian syndrome, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, dyslipidemia, hypertension, it's associated with it. It's thought to be the cause of dementia. It's causing all of these things. And it's the food that we eat. So if we're talking about insulin resistance and reversing that, I feel like Dr. Lustig's book is ideal. The other book I'd highly recommend if you struggle with keeping your word to yourself, if you feel like you are a self-sabotager, the book is The Mountain Is You by Brianna Wiest. It's Wiest. It's a very short book. I listened to it and then I bought it and I spend time with it. It's like it was a good friend and I want to spend time with it regularly. Very, very good book to help us understand why we do quote unquote self-sabotaging behaviors and how to fix that behavior. It's not more willpower, it's not more self-discipline. It's figuring out what we're asking of ourselves and how do we supply that to ourselves in a way that we're not stabbing ourselves in the back or going back on our word to ourselves. How do we supply the things that we need in a way that builds a trusting relationship with ourselves, not in a way that erodes that relationship? It's incredibly powerful. I'd highly recommend it. So yeah, that would be another book that I would recommend. Again, a lot of times people are like, I don't need to know to not eat chocolate cake. You don't need me to tell you to not eat Twix and Snickers bars. You know that. What you need to do is figure out why you continue to eat it, even when you know they make you sick. Brianna Wiest's book, The Mountain Is You, is going to help you with that. So, all right, I'm going to stop sharing. If anybody, we have a few minutes and we can definitely coach through anybody's plan for the holiday. The way that I recommend you do a holiday plan is that you start with what do you want from the holiday? Like, what do I want? There is some food. Ladies, my birthday is coming up in like a month, and that's not I'm not trying to elicit or get anybody to wish me happy birthday. I can't believe it's a month away and I usually I have a plan for my birthday 3 months in advance. I'm like, yes, we are going here. We are going to eat this. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait. Usually I've got a birthday plan for 3 months in advance. It snuck up on me this year. I want to have cake on my birthday. I definitely want to have cake on my birthday. And I'm not willing to not do it. In fact, I trust my biology and my health so much. I care for my body in a way all year long that makes occasionally having this food that is not healthy. It's like smoking a cigarette. It's not healthy for me. I can have it occasionally though, and it's not going to kill me. Okay. I want you to like that is true about Thanksgiving as well, right? Like, what do you want to have? You're like, I'm standing behind this. Like I say it all the time, cold therapy is going to kill me, I'm going to die early because I ain't doing cold therapy and I'm okay with that. If one piece of cake is what is going to do me in, I don't believe that that's going to do me in. And maybe if I ever got evidence that that was the case, I would make a different decision. But right now, the evidence that I have does not make me believe that. So one piece of cake is okay. So that's where I'm at. What do you want your holiday, your Thanksgiving to be? Do you want to have the roll? Maybe. I don't like rolls. That is not my thing. But my mama's stuffing, that is my jam. And I will show up for that. I want to have stuffing. I want to have probably some mashed potatoes. For me, that's all. I'll make apple pie and I will want to have my apple pie, but I'll have a small piece of it. It won't be a lot. I don't care for pumpkin pie. It's not that I don't like it. It's tasty. It's just, it's not my favorite. What is your favorite thing about the holiday that you absolutely want to have? Okay. Mama's stuffing, mashed potatoes, apple pie. Those are my three things. How can I have them in a way that doesn't make me sick? That looks like I have a couple bites of my mama's stuffing. That looks like I have a couple bites of the mashed potatoes. That looks like I have a very slender, small sliver piece of my apple pie. That's what I have. And then I eat chicken or the turkey, and then I eat the veggie tray. And there's usually like a cucumber salad, and somebody usually brings a green salad. There's like other things. Mama ain't starving at Thanksgiving this year. Like that is not happening. But there are a few things that I absolutely want. So that's the first thing that you have to ask yourself about the holiday. What do I absolutely want? There are a lot of things that I just have I'm not going to care about those. But what are the things I want? If you find that it's a lot of things, like there's 11 things at my Thanksgiving dinner that I absolutely want, I want to offer to you two bites of all of them. Two bites is not going to be the end of the world, even on one day. You can fix whatever happens, two bites of all of them. Recognize that your brain, the way that our biology is, your brain will have two bites and then it will eat the whole entire apple pie, chasing the feeling of those first two bites. Okay. Two bites, all you need. If you eat more than that of 11 things, you're going to probably be pretty full. Okay. Figure out what you want, figure out how you can have it in your meal in a way that you like. Okay. And then if you are going to have two bites of 11 dishes, and you know that's a huge surge of carbohydrates, like that's probably going to be somewhat negatively impacting my health, what tools do you have so that you can mitigate that? You can minimize that. I can fast. I can make sure to exercise. I can eat nutritional ketosis. Like I can get myself into keto till the day of Thanksgiving and improve like my insulin resistance until the day of Thanksgiving. And then after, like I'll come out of ketosis, but the next day I can do a long fast. The next day I can do a extended workout to improve my glucose, like lower my glucose and improve my insulin resistance. Like, what are the tools that you have to then manage the thing that you want to have in your life to make the holiday something that you enjoy and something that's amazing for you? I will offer to you, you do not want to sit there and eat yourself into a stuffed situation where you're miserable. That is not enjoyment, ladies, and do not let your brain tell you that it is. It is not. Okay. So those are the strategies that I would highly recommend you to give yourself 5 minutes to write down what you actually want out of the holiday and how you are going to manage that. When my birthday comes, I'm totally going to have, I say that I'll have a piece of like Cheesecake Factory cheesecake that's like the size of my head, but the reality is I can eat about a third of it before I'm like, okay, I'm done. But I will allow myself that, right? Like, okay, fine, I'll have that, but I don't eat it into a place that I'm sick. And then I do make sure that I'm exercising and I'm fasting and I'm doing all of these other things to help my body manage the assault that I just gave it in the form of cheesecake. Okay. That's the strategies you learn. Ladies, that it's not that you have to go through life not enjoying these foods. That is not it. How do you learn to have these foods in your life in a way that doesn't make you sick? That is the power of fixing your insulin resistance. And that is the stuff that I teach my clients. Make sure you make the plan and then come to the Friday coaching. If it worked and you like rock the face off of it, I want you to uncover what your brain believed in that moment that led to the feeling of empowerment that kept you doing the thing that you said you were going to do. I want you to see that because then I want you to use that thought on Friday and Saturday and Sunday and Monday and Tuesday and for however long you need to until you reverse your type 2 diabetes. If you rock the face off of Thanksgiving, high five up top, let's talk about how that happened. If you struggled and you stumbled, let's talk about why that happened too and figure out if we can see something else, another way to get a step forward. That's what I want to talk about next Friday, 9:30 a.m. Central Time. Be there. You should get reminders. If anybody has any questions between here and there, don't hesitate to reach out to me.